Before we dive into this incredible story, make sure you're part of our journey. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and get ready for a story that will leave you thinking. And if you love inspiring tales, a like goes a long way. Not my responsibility anymore. The words hung in the air as the teenager's hand disappeared beneath the churning waves. A mother's scream cut through the wind, collapsing to her knees on the wet sand. Around them, the crowd stood frozen, phones recording, but nobody moving. The sunset painted the California coast in shades of orange and gold, but darkness was spreading across the once peaceful scene. The off-duty lifeguard checked his watch again, arms crossed, regulations providing a shield against the desperate pleas. "I legally can't intervene after hours. Someone call 911. That's when a figure in a gray hoodie dropped his expensive camera onto the sand. Nobody recognized him at first, just a man kicking off his shoes and sprinting toward the violent surf while everyone else just watched. If this moment made you feel something, imagine what's coming next. Hit that like button and stay with us. Subscribe now. The beach had been peaceful just moments before, families packing up as the day wound down, seagulls circling for forgotten snacks, teenagers laughing near the shoreline. The 15-year-old boy had only wanted one more swim before heading home. Nobody noticed when the current caught him, dragging him beyond the safe zone marked by faded red buoys. His panicked splashing eventually caught attention, but by then, he was already too far out. "Help him!" The mother's voice broke as she pointed desperately toward the water. Her son wasn't a strong swimmer, a fact she was now screaming at anyone who would listen. "Please, he can't swim well. Please." Her knees dug into the wet sand, one hand clutching her chest as if physically holding her heart together. The lifeguard, a 20-something with sunburned shoulders and regulation red shorts, stood rigidly beside his tower, keys already in hand. "Look, I clocked out at 6. The beach is officially closed for swimming." His voice carried an artificial authority, contradicted by the way his eyes darted nervously between the drowning boy and his watch. "I could lose my job. I could get sued. There are protocols." The small crowd grew larger as more people noticed the commotion. Phones emerged from pockets and bags, their small glass eyes capturing the mounting tragedy. Murmurs rippled through the gathering. Somebody should do something. Somebody should help. Somebody should take responsibility. But nobody moved. The invisible barrier between observer and participant remained unbroken, as the boy's strength visibly faded with each passing second. Further down the beach, Leonardo DiCaprio had been enjoying a rare moment of solitude. The production of his new environmental documentary had wrapped early, and he'd slipped away from the crew, headphones on, capturing footage of shorebirds with his personal camera. The actor had developed a habit of documenting nature wherever he went, small moments of beauty amid his chaotic schedule. The sudden shift in energy drew his attention before the screams fully registered. Pulling his headphones down, he turned toward the commotion, at first just another curious onlooker. Then he saw it, the desperate hand above the waves, the mother collapsing in grief, the rigid posture of the lifeguard refusing to move. In that instant, something changed in his expression. Not the calculated emotion of an actor, but something raw and genuine. A moment of pure human recognition that transcended fame, wealth, and status. Things are about to take a turn. Don't miss what happens next. Subscribe, like our video, and keep watching. DiCaprio moved through the crowd with quiet determination, his celebrity status momentarily invisible beneath the urgency of the moment. As he approached the edge of the gathering, someone recognized him. A shocked whisper carrying his name through the onlookers. The recognition rippled outward, phones swiveling from the drowning boy to the approaching actor, creating a surreal split in attention. "Sir, you can't," the lifeguard began, stepping forward with one hand raised, but Leo brushed past him without acknowledgement. "Someone get a rescue board or something that floats." His voice carried the commanding presence of someone accustomed to being heard on set. The hoodie came off in one fluid motion, tossed aside as he scanned the water, measuring distance and current. An older man stepped forward. "The current's too strong. You'll both drown." "He's right," the lifeguard added, finding validation. "That's why we close at sunset. The conditions become unpredictable." DiCaprio locked eyes with the mother, whose sobbing had quieted into a terrible, hopeful silence. In that exchange, a wordless understanding passed between them, the universal language of human compassion that required no translation. "Sometimes you have to break the rules to do what's right," Leo said, not particularly to anyone, but loud enough for everyone to hear. The words carried the weight of conviction from a man who'd spent years advocating for environmental action while others made excuses. He kicked off his expensive shoes, quickly checking the position of the struggling teenager, whose movements were becoming increasingly feeble. A young woman pushed forward through the crowd, holding a foam bodyboard. "Here, use this exclamation mark," she called, extending it toward DiCaprio. He nodded gratefully, testing its weight. "I need someone to call the Coast Guard. Tell them exactly where we are." His focus remained on the water as he spoke, calculating his approach against the visible current patterns. The lifeguard stepped forward again, his professional pride visibly wrestling with his earlier stance. "This is completely against protocol. I can't authorize—" "I'm not asking for authorization," Leo replied, his voice level but firm. "I'm asking you to help save a life." The challenge hung in the air between them, not accusatory, but an invitation to choose conscience over convenience, humanity over bureaucracy. The crowd had swelled to dozens now, the barrier between spectators and participants dissolving as people began offering assistance. Someone brought a first aid kit. Another person offered their professional experience as a nurse. A small group formed a human chain extending from the shoreline, ready to help pull them in against the powerful current. DiCaprio positioned the bodyboard under his chest, his expression focused in a way that reminded onlookers of his intensity in The Revenant. Except this wasn't acting. This was real life, with real stakes, and no director to call cut if things went wrong. The teenager's head disappeared beneath the waves, then resurfaced weakly. The mother's scream pierced the growing murmurs of the crowd. The lifeguard looked from his watch to the drowning boy, to DiCaprio ready to launch into the water, and finally to the mother's desperation. Something shifted in his expression, the mask of procedure cracking to reveal the human beneath. Without further word, he grabbed his rescue tube from the nearby stand and kicked off his own shoes. "Wait," he called to Leo, professionalism reasserting itself in a different form. "I'm trained for this. We'll go together. This story is only getting deeper." What would you do in this situation? Comment below, and let's talk. The ocean roared its challenge as both men launched into the churning waves, DiCaprio with the bodyboard and the lifeguard with his rescue tube. The crowd collectively held its breath, phones still recording, but now forgotten in hands that gripped them too tightly. The mother had risen to her feet, hope and terror battling across her tear-streaked face. Leo's swimming was strong but unpracticed against such currents. The lifeguard moved with professional technique, quickly pulling ahead. They fought against waves that seemed determined to push them back to shore, to enforce the natural boundary between land and sea that humans crossed at their peril. "To the left!" someone shouted from shore, spotting the boy's arm as it briefly appeared above the water. The lifeguard adjusted course immediately, his training evident in every movement. DiCaprio followed, the bodyboard providing crucial stability as a particularly violent wave crashed over them both. Time stretched impossibly as they approached the drowning teenager. On shore, strangers gripped each other's hands. The artifice of urban isolation dissolved by collective hope. Social media live streams carried the scene across the world in real time, viewers joining in a global moment of suspended breath. The lifeguard reached the boy first, his professional training making the difference in the final approach. The teenager was barely conscious, his energy completely spent in the fight against the merciless current. With practiced movements, the lifeguard secured him with the rescue tube, but immediately began struggling against the combined force of the water and the dead weight of a nearly unconscious victim. DiCaprio arrived seconds later, maneuvering the bodyboard alongside them. "Get him on this!" he shouted over the crash of waves. Together, they managed to hoist the limp form of the boy onto the board, Leo stabilizing it while the lifeguard maintained control of the rescue line. "We need to move parallel to the shore before heading in," the lifeguard commanded, his professional authority now completely restored and redirected. "The rip current is strongest here." Leo nodded. No ego in the exchange, just two humans working together against nature's indifferent power. The boy coughed weakly, water spilling from his mouth, a hopeful sign of life that energized their efforts. On shore, the human chain extended further into the water, straining toward the trio, hands reaching outward in a physical manifestation of collective will. The return journey felt eternal. Each yard gained against the current a victory of human determination over natural force. DiCaprio and the lifeguard worked in wordless synchrony, communicating through glances and gestures with the fluency of those united by purpose rather than language. When they finally reached the human chain, exhaustion evident in their labored breathing, dozens of hands reached out to secure them. The transition from water to land happened in stages. First the boy passed carefully along the chain of strangers until he reached the shore where the nurse immediately began assessment. Then the lifeguard, professional to the end despite his earlier hesitation. Finally, DiCaprio, refusing help until the others were safe. As they all collapsed onto the sand, the mother fell to her knees beside her son, whose color was already improving as he coughed and sputtered back to full consciousness. Her gratitude was beyond words, expressed instead through tears and trembling hands that touched her child's face as if to confirm his solidity. The crowd erupted in cheers and relief, the collective tension releasing in a wave of emotion as powerful as the ocean they'd just conquered. Strangers hugged, cried, and celebrated together, momentary family united by witnessed courage. It's not over yet. The best part is coming. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss it. As emergency services arrived, their lights painting the gathering dusk in flashes of red and blue, the drama began transitioning to aftermath. The boy, wrapped in thermal blankets, managed a weak smile as paramedics prepared him for transport. His mother hadn't let go of his hand. Her expression transformed from desperation to profound relief. DiCaprio stood slightly apart, water still streaming from his clothes, trying to reclaim his anonymity now that the crisis had passed. But it was too late. The narrative had already been captured, shared, and was rapidly spreading across social platforms. In the strange alchemy of the digital age, a private act of courage was transforming into public inspiration. The lifeguard approached Leo, professional composure regained but fundamentally altered. "Thank you," he said simply, extending his hand. "You were right." The admission carried no defensiveness, just the honest recognition of one human to another. Within hours, the story dominated social media. Video clips spread across platforms, each with its own framing but all capturing the essential truth. When rules conflicted with humanity, DiCaprio had chosen humanity and inspired others to do the same. Comment sections filled with reflections on personal responsibility in an increasingly bureaucratic world. News networks picked up the story by morning, interviews with witnesses providing different perspectives on the same core narrative. The lifeguard, rather than becoming a villain, was praised for his ultimate choice to put life above procedure. His brief interview became its own viral moment. Sometimes we hide behind rules to avoid the risk of doing what's right. Today, I was reminded that some risks are worth taking. DiCaprio declined all interview requests, issuing only a brief statement redirecting attention to the importance of water safety and the recognition of rip currents. This characteristic humility only amplified the impact of his actions, creating space for the message rather than the messenger. A week later, the local council updated their beach safety protocols, extending lifeguard hours and implementing a volunteer system for off-hours monitoring. The changes came with a new slogan posted on signs along the shore: "Responsibility doesn't end at sunset." It was a small policy shift with potentially life-saving implications. The teenager, fully recovered and unexpectedly famous, used his platform to promote swimming lessons in underserved communities. His mother established a foundation focused on water safety education, turning personal trauma into public good. DiCaprio eventually incorporated subtle references to the incident in his environmental documentary, not to highlight his role, but to illustrate how individual actions ripple outward, how courage is contagious, how choosing humanity over bureaucracy creates space for others to do the same. The true measure of character, the film suggested, isn't found in following rules or breaking them, but in recognizing when compassion must transcend both. Perhaps most importantly, countless viewers who witnessed the event, either in person or through their screens, carried forward a strengthened belief in human potential and the enduring power of choosing conscience over convenience. Wow, what a story! If this moved you, imagine what else we have for you. Hit that like button, drop a comment, and let us know what you think.